on the outskirts of Chicago.
These lights were observed by thousands of people.
I saw 3 red lights.
This was definitely not an airplane. It was unlike anything I'd seen before or after.
The sightings spiral out from Tinley Park to towns all across the Chicago Southland. Residents are left without an explanation.
There are UFOs, I swear to God. This is no bull.
Pat Uskert is collecting video evidence from the eyewitnesses and attempting to pinpoint the precise locations of each sighting.
At this point, we really need to see a lot more information. I need to see more video. I need to talk to more people. We've got a lot of work ahead of us.
Former NASA analyst Dr. Ted Ackworth will use Pat's data and the videos to scientifically calculate the size and speed of this object, and with this information, attempt to identify it.
Are these 3 points of light all fixed together as part of one rigid object? And if so, how big is this thing?
And Bill Burns tests an alleged hoax to see whether the lights are actually flares attached to balloons.
We may not know what these lights were, but by the end of this investigation, we're sure going to find out what these lights were not.
We're meeting Sam Moranto, director of Illinois MUFON. He's our main contact here on the ground in Tinley Park.
Sam was the point man. In cop shop terms, he's the squeal man for this case. He takes the first call.
When everyone saw the lights, they contacted him. He's actually been in touch with all the people who have the footage, the eyewitnesses, the people who say they saw this thing in the sky, whatever it was.
I think I probably interviewed well in excess of 100 people.
According to Sam, the Tinley Park events are among the best documented UFO sightings ever.
Many people have seen UFOs. Rarely do they report them. You rarely even get so much as a picture out of most UFO cases.
Approximately 25 to 30 videos exist, shot simultaneously from different parts of Tinley Park and the surrounding suburbs.
There are still many more people to see and talk to, more footage to recover, and I think this case is evolving.
This thing was seen by thousands of people. It did make newspapers, nationally, in Illinois, and even around the world.
So Pat goes right to the source, a correspondent from the local paper, the Southtown Star.
I'm meeting with Jason Freeman. As a journalist, he's
lights almost stayed rigid with respect to each other as they moved through the sky. Do flares do the same thing?
I think it would be premature to jump into this and say we're looking at some sort of huge extraterrestrial phenomenon or giant craft over Tinley Park. What we have is 3 points of light in the sky, and I'd like to keep it right there until I get more information.
Skeptics claim there is an ordinary explanation for the Tinley Park sightings, but the multiple witnesses don't agree. Never before seen footage from that night may finally...
I knew it wasn't a plane or aircraft of any kind that I've ever seen. There was no noise. So we were kind of amazed and just started to think what it could be, and I really have no answer for that.
team. But around 11:30 p.m., TJ and Dave have another sighting. A single red point of light that follows the same path as the object seen earlier.
Oh, come on. Kurt! They're back! UFOs are back.
This time, Dave is ready. He has a high-powered telescope in hand.
I didn't see any sides or anything, but from the naked eye, it looked like one dot in the sky. But through the telescope, it looked oval-shaped with about 10 or 12 red lights around it.
Pat collects TJ's video and other data for Ted to analyze. He uses a GPS locator to plot the precise location of the sighting. Next, a clinometer helps establish how far off the horizon the alleged UFO appeared to be. Finally, compass readings pinpoint the trajectory of the UFO across the sky.
Definitely the footage that TJ just showed me is very similar to the footage I saw earlier with Sam. These are definitely videos of the same event, the same lights over Tinley Park, whatever they were.
What was this object? What was its size? And how far away was it from the witnesses? Or was it an object at all? In order to complete the triangulation, Ted will need data from one final location. With this information, he can also start estimating the size and speed of what these people were seeing, and perhaps even identify it. That same night, Bob Peterson is with his children in his backyard when he sees the same triangle-shaped object.
Dawson, go ask Mom for the telephone. I want to call somebody.
What made you take notice of these lights?
I just happened to look up and there were 3 red lights in the sky. And it was definitely an odd thing to see. We are kind of in a flight pattern here from Midway Airport. There's a lot of activity as far as planes are concerned. So at first I did think they were helicopters, but as they got closer, I mean, they were dead silent. There was just no noise coming from them. So at that point, you know, it wasn't a helicopter.
How about airplanes?
No, it's way too slow.
Despite his sighting, Bob is not convinced that he has seen anything extraordinary.
My opinion is there was some type of hoax put on. I don't know what it would be.
Bill Dooley, Bob's friend and neighbor, also witnesses the lights, but his reaction is very different.
We actually had a high-powered telescope back here at the time, and one of our friends got right on it. But he said it looked just like we're seeing it with our naked eye.
October 31st, 2004, shows a conventional aircraft, a helicopter, flying near the triangle shape. The team contacted all local airports, the FAA, Pilots of America, and numerous other aviation organizations in hopes of finding the pilot. One pilot responded saying he had been in the air and saw something strange that night. When asked for an interview, he refused, claiming he feared for his job.
I'm hoping that we can get a sense of the overall size. Is this thing 10 feet across or a quarter mile across? We could take the height of that helicopter image in this frame,
right,
and compare that to the height of the lights, and calculate the distance between those two lights.
Because spatially, just in the imagery itself, it's probably about 30 times the linear width of this helicopter, right?
Yeah, that's getting up to 1,000 feet.
I was going to say 1,000 feet as opposed to the width of the helicopter.
So based on this method, I think we're in the ballpark, of 1,000+ feet in separation between these three lights.
With their estimate of 1,000 feet between the points of light, Ted and Terrence plug in the location data that Pat has gathered from the eyewitnesses. The GPS locator pinpoints each sighting on the map. The clinometer reading reveals the angle of elevation, or how high off the horizon the lights appear to be. Compass readings indicate in which direction the alleged UFO is traveling. Without this additional information, no true estimate of the size of the object can be made. Based on the clinometer and compass readings, the witnesses all appear to have seen the same object to the west and low to the horizon, between 5 and 10 degrees.
And we know from the footage here from TJ, which is taken from here, looking in that direction, at about roughly a 10-degree elevation, that our object is approximately that distance away from TJ.
And we figured that was about 2.5 miles.
If the unknown object is 2.5 miles away, at an average of 7 degrees off the horizon, and with 1,000 feet between each point of light, then they can estimate its total size.
I think 1,500 is a pretty good estimate, plus or minus a couple few hundred feet.
It's definitely not the distance from wingtip to wingtip of anything that...
Absolutely not. And I don't know any structure that you could fly that could hold lights 1,500 feet apart.
To the best of their knowledge, the alleged UFO over Tinley Park is one object several thousand feet in the air and about 1,500 hundreds.
The frame got, and the more impossible it was for the balloons to lift this thing. So it just seems like if they're describing a giant triangle, there's just no way these balloons could lift this thing. It would take possibly hundreds or even thousands of balloons to lift a structure that large.
They know from Ted's analysis the object is massive, and the lights are connected. It's unclear how such a hoax could be possible. Still, the team works to get the balloons airborne and in formation in order to compare the flares to the strange lights on the videos.
I think the lightning has passed. We may have a window to launch.
Sam Moranto and several eyewitnesses from 2004, Bill Dooley and his son Nick, and Bob Peterson and his son Tyler arrive for the test.
Since they saw the lights with the naked eye originally, they're the best witnesses to tell us, hey, this looks like the lights we saw, this didn't look like the lights we saw.
For test purposes, they've also brought the same cameras they filmed the Tinley Park lights with in August of 2004.
So what we want to do is maybe use their cameras to take footage of the balloons that we launch and compare them to their footage from 2004. Let's see how it matches up.
The 3 balloons are attached on a line at 15-foot intervals. A flare is then suspended from each balloon.
Gentlemen, light your flares.
Negative oil launch.
Balloon 2.
Go ahead, Dave.
While Sam and the team have only seen the video evidence of the Tinley Park lights, Bob, Bill, and their sons are eyewitnesses. They know firsthand what the object looked like in 2004. The quality of the colors, the way it held its triangular form, and how it moved across the night sky.
Now, what we saw in the summer of 2004 was much steadier flow of light, not jerking around like they did. The color was bright red, like you'd see a light on top of a cell tower. This was more orange, more pink, so no, nothing like it.
Bob Peterson's initial impression is that the 2004 lights are a hoax,
Now, of course, in this case, there was some kind of wind, and they're just all over the place.
As Bill and Pat noted in the field, their balloons behaved erratically in the wind, in stark contrast to the 2004 footage. According to National Weather Service data, on the night of the experiment, winds are clocked at 12 miles per hour. In 2004, the winds are more than twice as strong at 30 miles per hour. Yet the lights do not exhibit the same erratic behavior as the flares and balloons.
I mean, I could imagine a tether, like a nylon filament tether, but that would only limit the distance this way, but not this way. And we're seeing that they're not kind of bouncing in towards one another and hitting outer limits. They're locked.
What this seems to reinforce to the team is that the 2004 lights must be locked in place via some form of rigid structure. Without this, the light should exhibit the same volatile behavior as the experiment video.
The longer it holds that configuration, the stronger and stronger the case if they are actually locked. That's a pretty important conclusion.
I think so. Yeah, it's definitely not three independent floating flares.
But does this prove that the witnesses in Tinley Park and other locations around the world photographed a flying craft? Ted and Terrence also want to contrast the color and light quality of the flares in comparison to the original footage.
Unfortunately, it's very hard to tell with these consumer-grade cameras. The exposure settings and the sensitivity is such that you can shoot dramatically different colored lights, and very often you're going to see them basically bloom to almost solid white. The biggest difference that's pretty clear to me is the intensity differences. The flickering, basically, for lack of a better word, is very evident in the flares.
Ted and Terrence also look for scintillation, any fluctuation in the quality of the light. A constant light source will have less scintillation than a less stable source, like the flares.
To me, it's actually an illuminating source. It's very clear, some kind of light, as opposed to some kind of burning combustion.
Which will have its own variability.
Right.
But Terrence brings up another intriguing point of comparison. The experiment clearly shows the flares dropping residue, but in the original video from 2004, there is no evidence of any residue.
I'd love to be able to say that our experiment and our analysis of the evidence leaves us with a very credible explanation. This was flares floating on balloons. But I can't say that. I think it's extremely unlikely that is the explanation for what we have here.
I can say definitively that there's no way that I can see any kind of tethered balloon light source flare
that because we knew that that would make its way into the tabloid media and the UFO subculture and begin to start this slowly snowballing effect of fearing everything alien. So that's sort of how the game is played. It's been played for thousands of years by despotic demagogues, whether they be religious figures or political figures. And there's always an agenda behind it. The agenda behind it is to manipulate people through fear. And I think that, you know, one of the big challenges of this era right now is for people to transcend and see through that. And it's like the old Who song, "We won't be fooled again." And I think, you know, unfortunately, I think a lot of people have been fooled. And the idea that these programs aren't very well funded and extremely sophisticated in the technologies they have, you know, it's just a wrong idea. They are well funded, albeit illegally, and they are very sophisticated in the technologies they have and also in the ability they have to stage something and fool people. So I think you have to view so much of this with an eye of, it's sort of like, is it real or Memorex? You know, the old commercial years ago about the audio tapes. You know, is it actually an ET event, or is it something masquerading as ET or alien for the purpose of psychological warfare, like the Benowitz case that everyone probably knows about, the Air Force Office of Special Investigations case back in the day in the near Sandia National Laboratories in Kirkland Air Force Base, where, you know, they really did stage not only a human abduction, but a whole series of things and documents to put people off the course. Now, what a lot of people don't know is what they were really trying to hide, aside from putting out the false information, is that there was a woman that Paul Benowitz knew that had actually seen near Kirkland and Sandia a man-made anti-gravity propulsion device that looks like a UFO. And in order to sort of brainwash her into thinking that was not ours but alien, they set up this whole series of things that Richard Doty and others were involved in. And I think that this is a real problem because, you can't take things at face value, and when you do, you're going to find that you're just being played by some very sophisticated people who have a lot of experience manipulating mass markets and mass media and subcultures into a certain type of reactive or reactionary perspective. And I'd say, well, you know, you can never prove a negative. So you can never prove that there are no civilizations out there that may not have our best interest at heart. But let's say even if that were true, what's your response going to be? Is your response going to be more war, i.e. Star Wars, interplanetary systems that are going into war? Well, if you understand technologies that are these scalar electromagnetic weapon systems, you can take out an entire planet with a system like that. So if hydrogen bombs and atomic bombs would leave the world uninhabitable, these systems are even worse than that. So there is only one path forward, and it's peace. And it's not as exciting as a horror film about aliens. It's not as titillating about finding a new group of people. You know, you can't overtly be a racist, and you can't overtly hate women, or you can't. Now they're wanting to find a way that people can overtly hate something. Well, what's the next something? Well, it's another system out there, another star system. other by the millions, and setting up these systems that are designed to manipulate people into larger and larger and more expensive battles. And I think that's something that can only be changed by the people, because there's so much power that is centered at the top of this food chain of exactly what Eisenhower warned us about, the military-industrial complex, which is now the military-industrial financial laboratory research complex. And at the deepest levels of it are folks who really do want to be able to maintain control over not just American or British population, but a global population by presenting an existential threat that is not human. And I think that drives so much of the agenda of the false information, the concocted cases, the stagecraft. Now, have there been people who have been horrible victims of this? Yes. And, a lot of people, when they've heard me say this, say, well, you're not very sympathetic to people who've been injured or abducted. I said, no, I'm very sympathetic. Where I differ is the conclusion of who's doing it and what's behind it. There was a physicist who used to work out at Pine Gap, the facility near Alice Springs in the center of the continent of Australia, and brilliant man. And he was talking to me about how they had been manufacturing for years these creatures that look like aliens, but they're actually man-made kind of bio-nanotechnology creatures that have been used in abductions and have really been very persuasive for a lot of people, thinking that they had an encounter with an alien when it was actually something that people were making that was some excellent stagecraft. And I say excellent in the sense of very well done, but diabolical and absolutely evil. And so I think that, until you get do a really good research on this and begin to drill down that, since the 80s there have been people who have concluded that, it's not just MK Ultra at the CIA that was doing experiments on people. There are all kinds of experiments that have been done with some technologies that most people wouldn't believe humans have. But it's because they're assuming that the technologies they know about, such as might be at MIT or Caltech or Oxford or Cambridge, that's the state of the art. It is not the state of the art. The state of the art of the technologies are unpublished in deep black projects that are in these underground facilities near Edwards and the Nellis Range, what people call Area 51, but nobody in the business calls it that. And these technologies that are in the hands of the big corporate titans, such as Lockheed Martin and Northrop Grumman and SAIC and E-Systems and Raytheon and on and on and on. Those technologies are highly classified and are, most people if somebody has chest pain, there are like 115 things that can be. One of them is a heart attack. But if you don't know about the other 114 other things, you're going to miss a dissecting thoracic aneurysm, which is, of course, what killed Princess Diana. So you have got to have enough knowledge and information. What I find is sort of difficult in the UFO subculture is that people aren't drilling down at the depth that they need to, because the people studying new energy and anti-gravity and secret aircraft programs don't give much. Some of them don't even think any of it's ET. A lot of the people involved with the ET and so-called alien issue don't know about the other. You really have to put all of it together in a comprehensive bit of information, and this is what I've been trying to bring forward. It's difficult because people want simplistic answers, but it ain't simple. If it were simple, this problem would have been solved before I was born in the 50s. So I think that's why we as a people have to begin to say, this has got to be childhood zen now. We have to have a mature understanding of this issue, but not only in terms of how interstellar civilizations might appear in our time and space and how we might make contact with them, but what are the capabilities within the deep black programs at the Lockheed Skunk Works inside what's called the Cube, the big underground cube area near Edwards Air Force Base. What are the capabilities within, out at Pine Gap in Australia? What are the capabilities that are electromagnetic weapon systems or systems that could simulate an event? You have to know all of this in order to actually go out there and understand what's happening. And if you don't have that comprehensive amount of information, it's like a blind man holding on to an elephant, and you may be holding on to the back end of it. So I think it's a complicated issue. It's not insurmountable, but one can't take a facile, and it's not a trivial issue to get all this information around into a comprehensive paradigm. And that's what I didn't know 24 years ago when I started the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the Worldwide Disclosure Movement. I knew about some of this, but between 1990 and the year 1998 or so, I went through a very steep learning curve from people who were on the inside of these projects. I mean, as you know, I have an uncle who was Northrop Grumman and worked on the lunar module, the thing that put the first man on the moon. So I had a lot of contact. When I began to learn what our capabilities were that were classified, that are 100% human, I went, oh my God, this is a really complex issue. It's not as simple as people think.
So when I know Dr. J, and we have some guests on the line that want to get some questions into you, Dr. Gray, like Johnny Webb all the way from the UK, but I wanted to get this in. The false flag event, is it on or off the table by the powers that may be? A major invasion, CNN posted, and then there it is. Everybody knows that here's the extraterrestrial. We know we're not alone. Is this on the table, off the table, and how are you going to know if it's not legitimate, if it's one of ours or if it's the real deal?
Well, first of all, interstellar civilizations have no need to invade here. I mean, I think, with all due respect to Zachariah Sitchin and others, no civilization needs to come here to get anything we have here. We don't need to be turned into slaves digging up gold. If you understand the technologies of interstellar travel, you can materialize any element, any material you want through resonance field frequencies, and I can get into this later if you want to talk about it. So this is not something that, there's no real reason to come here. And by the way, they estimate there are 11 billion